Well, good morning, everyone. Let us pray together. Lord, as we come to your wonderful word, we just pray that you will speak to us. Reveal to us your goodness. Reveal to us your wonderful truth. Lord Jesus, you said to us that we shall know the truth, and the truth shall set us free. And so we just pray for our liberation, Lord, as we now hear your word. Help me, Lord, as I seek to be able to say what you've put on my heart, Lord. And I just want it to bless your people. In your name I pray. Amen. Well, recently I heard a story about a woman who for many years really struggled to sleep. And she was worried that her house was going to be burgled. And one night, in the middle of the night, there was a crashing sound in the house, and her husband went downstairs to investigate. And lo and behold, before him was a burglar. And so the husband said to the burglar, "Would you mind coming upstairs to meet my wife? She's been waiting for you for nearly 20 years. You see, there's a serious point with that story. And it's this: although a burglar can steal your possessions just once, it is worry that can steal your soul, can capture your mind, and can sap all your strength for many, many nights and for many, many years. In researching this topic of worry, I have discovered that there are way over 100 diseases that can be directly attributed to worry. This is no niche subject at all. It really is something that affects us all. It's become as natural to us as breathing. Someone has said that there are more people addicted to anxiety than all the other addictions combined. Now, I have no idea how you could verify that, how you could quantify that. But doesn't it just kind of ring true? Just as we think about this period of the pandemic, which one of us can honestly say we haven't been worrying? We haven't had a period where we have really been quite anxious, whether it's about our job or our health or the health of a loved one, or just how our society is going to be able to function now or in the future. The pandemic has no doubt massively affected and is affecting our mental health. Perhaps we feel like a cat on a hot tin roof. We never feel quite settled. We don't sleep like we used to sleep. Perhaps we don't eat like we used to eat. We're just never settled, always somewhat anxious. We don't have that peace, perhaps, we used to have. Well, if you are feeling unsettled this morning, if you are worried, what hope does the Bible have to offer you? What does Paul say is the big solution to worry? Well, if you have a Bible, could you turn to Philippians 4? And we're going to look at verses 6 to 7 as we carry on our series, Guarding Our Minds. Last week, Marilyn looked at joy, and this week we're going to look at how we go from a state of worry to a state of peace. How does it all happen? Well, this is what the Apostle Paul says in Philippians 4, verse 6 to 7. Do not be anxious, don't be worried about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which can transcend all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. The Philippians were a group of people that were habitually worried about many things, and particularly they were worried about all the divisions going on in the church. And what is it that Paul offers as a solution to a very anxious people and to us as an anxious people? He says, do not worry about anything. Don't be content to live with habitual worry. Now, you don't have to be a trained counsellor to realise that that advice doesn't seem very sensitive. It doesn't seem the sort of thing you'd normally say to someone who comes to you because they're worried. Maybe they've lost their job or there's a health issue. You wouldn't advise them and just say to them simply, well, don't worry. Take a chill pill. Don't worry about it. That would seem very insensitive. The person would be thinking to themselves, well, what the heck do you think I'm trying to do? I don't want to be worried. Well, perhaps it's quite an interesting thing to be thinking about when we think about the author, the person who said, do not worry. Because if there's someone who had a right to be worried, surely it was the Apostle Paul. This is someone who was constantly on the move. He was in and out of prison all the time. He had been shipwrecked. He had constant pressure for caring for multiple churches. And he records that often he went without sleep. And yet it is the same person who says, do not worry about anything. Well, perhaps we'll understand what he's talking about and why he doesn't want us to be content with living with worry in our lives by understanding what worry actually is. What does it mean to worry? Well, the word worried or anxious in this passage means this. It means to be pulled in different directions, or to be choked or strangled by something. It kind of harks back to that parable that Jesus shares about the sower. And one of the seed falls on the ground with the weeds. The weeds, of course, represent the cares of this life and how they can easily start to strangle, to choke us, to divide us, to pull us apart. Now, of course, to have concerns in this life is perfectly normal. We all care about things, and hopefully we all care about people. We'd be pretty heartless if we didn't say we cared about anyone or anything. We care about people. You know, I'm so thankful to have a 7-week-old son. I really care and love him. His well-being is so important to me. It is a concern and it is on my mind. And if he was up, as he is up most nights, crying an abnormal amount, and believe me, he does cry a lot, but if he was crying and constantly crying and we couldn't do anything about it, I'd be very concerned. I'd be Googling at 2 o'clock in the morning, how do I stop my baby from crying? And I think that's quite normal. I think that's okay. But the problem is when concern turns to worry is when you are so concerned about the problems of life that you can never think of anything else. It's that all-consuming feeling of uncertainty and fear. It's that constantly being emotionally agitated, mentally harassed, and just burdened about things that perhaps even haven't happened. Oh, but they could. And you start to catastrophize. You start to, in your mind, have these mental flowcharts about what if this happens to my job and it could go that way or that way. And you spend all this time worrying. You're probably well into worry when the thing you are concerned about is when the thing you are concerned about is the first thing you think about in the morning and always the last thing you think about before you go to bed. Or when you find yourself thinking about that thing in every spare moment of the day. Or when you find yourself bringing up that issue time and time again in every conversation you have with someone. And that little evaluation ultimately reveals why anxiety is a problem that we really do need to deal with in our lives. Because what it shows us is worry ultimately is a bad thing because it distracts us from getting on with the things that matter in life. Here's a task for you to do this week, and these questions will be in the discipleship guide if you meet in a life group. Here's some questions to ask yourself to just kind of evaluate what worry's like in your life. 3 quick questions. Number 1, what have you been worrying about in this past week? Second question is, how much time did you spend worrying? 15 minutes? An hour? 5 hours? A day? All week? And then the last question is, what did worrying actually accomplish? See, as long as you're worrying, you can't do anything else. You get strangled, you get divided by the worries of life. Richard Pritchard says that worry is stewing without doing. It's like being in a rocking chair. You put so much energy in going back and forth, but it doesn't get you anywhere. It moves you not 1 inch closer to a solution. A few years ago, there was a professor at a leading American university who did some really interesting studies on people that worried. And he interviewed loads of people, and he discovered these interesting facts, these interesting statistics, that 40% of what we worry about never happens. No wonder Jesus says, do not worry about tomorrow. Don't catastrophize. Don't speculate about what may or may not happen. 40% of what we worry about never happens. 30% of our worries concern the past. 12% are needless worries about health. 10% are worries about petty issues. And that leaves just 8% of our worries are over legitimate concerns. Now, if my maths is correct, that means that 92% of our worry time is a complete waste of time. It's complete wasted energy. I could end the talk there, couldn't I? I could say, look, I found a solution to how you can not have 92% of your worries. But what you're thinking is, what about the 8%? And that wouldn't honour the passage, because Paul says, do not worry about anything. Don't even put up with 8% of worries in your life. So how are we going to deal with worry today? Well, Paul not only says stop, but he also says do. And he offers us like a replacement therapy. He wants us to replace worry with prayer. And so he says this in verse 6. Let's look at verse 6 again. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition or supplication, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. 3 quick bits of advice for any of us who are worriers. Number 1, Paul says, pray about everything. Here's a universal rule for every situation in your life. Pray. Make prayer the first thing that you do. It's interesting when you read the story of Nehemiah. And Nehemiah is a cupbearer for the king. The Israelites are in exile. And he hears the news that the walls of Jerusalem are completely desolate, that important city is in ruin. And what it doesn't say is that he panicked and then he tried to solve the problem. As the cupbearer, he went straight to the king. No, what it says is he heard the news in the month of Kislev, and then he went to the king in the month of Nisan. That's 3 months later. For 3 months, Nehemiah spent time praying and fasting, interceding to God about an issue. I don't know about you, but that's pretty much the complete reverse of what I do. I come to prayer, if I'm honest, as a last resort. And I think I know why, because often I think I can solve most problems. Oh, I'm okay, I'll be able to talk to that person and sort that problem out and iron out that issue, and I can put those things right. And so prayer is at the bottom, not at the top of my list. Corrie Ten Boom says this wonderful wisdom on this issue of worry. She says, if something is too small to be turned into prayer, it is too small to be made into a burden. You see, what I do and what we all do is we start to take on small burdens, little issues that we feel that we don't need to disturb God or anyone else about. And of course, as we take on those small burdens, eventually they add up. And then we've got the weight of the world upon our shoulders. This is why 1 Peter 5:7 says, cast all your worries, all your anxiety onto God, because he cares for you. There is not one thing in this life that you need to carry on your own. In every situation, Paul says, pray. And within that sort of topic of the importance of bringing everything to God, we need to also get very specific. Because Paul is saying if we want to be relieved of worry, we ought to move from praying about general things to very specific things. How often is my prayer life, and perhaps your prayer life, filled with prayers like this? Lord, I just pray that you will bless me, bless my family, bless my health, bless, 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 bless. That word we just use to kind of as a blanket prayer over anything. But I think what we need to do more is we need to spell out to God the things that are worrying us, the things that are choking us, the things that are pulling us in different directions. And just like it's wonderful when you can go to a friend and you can just divulge all the things that are concerning you, and you feel that sense of relief that you're able to get that off your chest. Well, how much more when we go to God and we can share with him all of our worries, all of our concerns, when we can be honest before him, when we can make ourselves vulnerable, how much more do we become relieved? So number one, pray about everything. Number two, pray with thanksgiving. Now that's a vital detail in what Paul says that really shouldn't be overlooked, because let's think about it. Worry and gratitude, this is what Paul is saying, worry and gratitude can never coexist. Just think about that for a moment. Either gratitude will drive out worry, or worry drives out gratitude. When you come to God, you see, when you come to God as creator, redeemer, sustainer, funny enough, your worries get put in perspective, or perhaps they just completely melt away. Well, what are we going to do to increase our gratitude, to increase our thanksgiving? Well, one of the things we can do is we can reflect on the character of God. A.W. Tozer says, what comes into your mind when you think about God is the most important thing about you. That's why David says when he's delivered from his enemies, for who is God besides the Lord? And who is this rock except our God? It is God who arms me with strength and keeps my way secure. We need to constantly remind ourselves of who God is, and that helps put in perspective our worries. Perhaps another thing we need to do is we need to learn the promises of the Bible. It's great that we've got the Bible challenge. That's not just something for kids. That's something for all of us to do. We need to learn and memorize Scripture. We need to use those verses as kind of fighting verses to help us when anxiety seems to take over. If you're not sure where to start with memorizing bits of Scripture, what about memorizing these verses we're looking at in Philippians, maybe Philippians 4, 5 to 12 from this mini-series? Maybe another thing we could do is listen to worship music. This isn't just, don't just listen to worship music that kind of feels quite good and has a good melody, but actually speaks truth into your life and allows it to go deep. I know so many times when I've gone through a difficult situation, the words of that simple song, trust and obey, for there's no other way to be happy in Jesus than to trust and obey. How that has helped me. How that has brought me peace. I wonder what songs are on your playlist for times of worry. So pray about everything, and pray about with thanksgiving. And then thirdly and lastly, let's pray with expectations. Paul says, present your requests to God. When me and Heidi started dating, each Christmas I was presented with a list of things that she wanted. And I had to methodically, it wasn't a massive list, but there would be things that she wanted. And I stuck to that list for the first couple of years. And then what I did is I veered off the list. I thought I'd be a bit more spontaneous. I thought ladies liked surprises. And how I was so wrong. And what I'm not saying is that we come before God and we lay out our expectations, and if he doesn't meet them, then he lets us down. But what I am saying is be clear with God, with your requests, with your expectations, that you want him involved in all of these things. And so when you do go to that job interview and you get it, you give glory to God. Or when you do go to that job interview and the door is closed, you know God has been involved in that. And what's the result of all this as we're coming now towards an end. What's the transforming power of prayer? How do we transform worry into prayer? What ultimately happens? We'll look at verse 7 because Paul finishes with a promise. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. I think it's often in times of crisis when we actually discover what we believe in practice. We know theoretically what we believe as Christians, but now, as our foundations are shaken and tested, we actually see in life what is sustaining us in practice, what's actually holding us up. And anyone can trust God when all of our preferences are met, when no one is sick that we love, when our job seems to be all right, when we've got money in the bank, when our kids seem to be happy. But it's all about trusting God when you're phoned up this week and you're told that you're going to be made redundant, or you've received back the test and you are positive for COVID-19. Or your child's school's been closed yet again and you don't know for how long. It's those times that God can take our troubled hearts and our minds and sustain them, can keep them going, not just with a banana recipe that we might have read that might get us thinking of good things, but actually guards our hearts and minds with his peace. What is this peace? This is not a peace which is absence of problems. It's not pretending difficulties don't exist and just getting on with things. What this peace is about living with the assurance that God is all sufficient in every situation. To a bunch of confused disciples, deflated disciples, after Jesus has died, when Jesus comes to visit them again, he says to them, "Peace be with you." The disciples, as with us, are invited to cast all of their cares, all of their worries about the past and the future, to give them to God, for whom they are no worry at all. It's a peace which, Paul says, transcends, it surpasses all understanding. That means that no human mind, no knowledge, no skills that we can accumulate as humans can ever produce it. It can't be manufactured anywhere. You can't read it in a self-help book. No theory on mindfulness or meditation will produce it, or positive thinking. It is simply a gift offered by God and God alone. And today Jesus wants to offer all of us his peace, a peace not dependent on outward circumstances, a peace which is independent of them, a peace which no experience of life can ever take from us. No sorrow, no danger, no suffering can ever make it any less. So in closing, here's just a simple question for you to ponder this week. As you go about this week, are you going to walk in worry? Or will you take up God's invitation for you to have his peace, which can guard your heart and mind? I wish I could say that everything in terms of the pandemic will be fine by Christmas and beyond that. It might be a bit better, but ultimately only God knows. But however the next few weeks, the next few months are, we know that we can only overcome this ultimately by being led to the rock that the psalmist says is higher than I. We can only ultimately continue to have peace if we trust in the one who says, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid." Let's pray together. Lord, we just want to thank you for your word, and we want to thank you that you are the God who can give us peace. Lord, that is our longing. And we know, Lord, that we so often allow ourselves to get worried. We so often allow ourselves to accumulate so many burdens, of which, within an instance, we can give to you. So I just pray for everyone, Lord, listening to this message. Help us to be those that turn our worry into prayer. And may we be so pleased with the peace that we receive as a result of that. In your name we pray. Amen.